You think you know what a 1960s housewife did all day. You have seen the pictures, the perfect hair, the clean dress, the smile, the vacuum cleaner that looks like a small spaceship, the kitchen so bright it could blind you. You have seen the television shows, the calm voice, the dinner on the table at exactly 6 o'clock, everything neat, everything easy, everything simple. And if you are listening to this right now, wherever you are in the world, I want you to do something for me. I want you to leave a comment telling me where you are listening from, your city, your country, your corner of the earth. And while you are at it, tell me any topic you want me to talk about next. Because apparently I have become the person who helps you fall asleep by talking about the past, which is either very sweet or deeply concerning, and I have not decided which one yet. But here is the thing. That image you have. That 1960s housewife. That life you think was slow and boring and maybe even a little bit lazy compared to today. It is a lie, not a small lie, not a little adjustment to make things look prettier. A big lie. A lie so big that it has lasted 60 years. A lie built by advertisers and television producers and people selling you washing machines. Because the truth is this. The daily routine of a housewife in 1963 would destroy most people today. Not because the work was hard in the way we think of hard work. Not because she lifted bricks or dug ditches. But because she never stopped. Not for one single hour. From the moment she woke up until the moment she collapsed into bed, her body was moving. Her hands were wet. Her back was bent. Her legs were carrying her up and down stairs and across rooms and into basements and back up again. And none of it was counted as work. None of it got a paycheck. None of it got a lunch break. None of it got a weekend. None of it got respect. It got a smile in a magazine. It got a pat on the head from a husband who had no idea what she did all day. It got called natural. It got called easy. It got called what women do. But let me tell you what she actually did. Let me walk you through one single day. A Tuesday, a nothing day, not a holiday, not a special occasion. Just a regular boring Tuesday in 1963. And by the end of this, you will understand why that life, that so-called simple life, would flatten you like a pancake if you tried it today. You will understand why the myth of the easy housewife is one of the most successful lies of the 20th century. And you will understand why the women who lived it rarely talked about how tired they were because no one wanted to hear it. So get comfortable, adjust your pillow, let your shoulders drop. Because we are about to step into a kitchen in the middle of America in the middle of the century, and we are going to stay there for a very long time. And the first thing you need to know is this. She woke up before everyone else. Always. Every single day. Because if she did not, the entire house would fall apart. The version you inherited goes like this. A housewife in the 1960s had it easy because of all the new machines. The washing machine, the dryer, the dishwasher, the vacuum cleaner, the refrigerator, the electric stove. Technology had arrived. The future was here. And that meant housework had become simple, quick, almost automatic. Women had time to relax, time to watch television, time to have coffee with the neighbors, time to read magazines and bake cookies and look pretty when their husbands came home. This is what the advertisements told everyone. This is what the magazine articles promised. This is what television shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best showed every single week. The housewife gliding through her day, calm, unruffled, never sweating, never exhausted, always ready with a smile and a casserole. And if you grew up after 1970, this is probably the image that was handed to you. Your grandma, your great-aunt, the women in old photographs, they had it easier than women today. They did not work outside the home. They did not have careers. They did not have stress. They just stayed home, and home was easy, except it was not. Not even a little bit, because here is what actually happened. Yes, the machines existed. But they did not work the way you think they worked. The washing machine in 1963 was not like the one you have now. You could not throw in a load of laundry, press a button, and walk away. You had to fill it with water using a hose connected to the sink. You had to stand there and watch it because if it overflowed, it would flood your basement. You had to move the clothes from the wash cycle to the spin cycle by hand. Soaking wet clothes, heavy clothes, clothes that dripped all over the floor. Then you had to hang them up to dry because not everyone had a dryer, and even if you did, it took forever, and it cost money to run. And your husband would complain about the electric bill, so you hung everything on a line, outside if the weather was good, inside if it was raining, in the basement if it was winter. And you did this every single day, not once a week, every day. Because a family of 4 or 5 or 6 people generated an enormous amount of laundry. Shirts, pants, dresses, socks, underwear, towels, sheets, cloth diapers if you had a baby, cloth diapers. Think about that for a second, no disposable diapers. Just cloth ones that you had to rinse out in the toilet, then soak in a bucket, then wash in the machine, then hang to dry, then fold, then use again every single day, and that was just laundry. The dishwasher, if you had one, was loud and slow and did not actually get the dishes very clean. So you had to rinse everything before you put it in, and then you had to dry everything by hand after it came out. Most women did not bother. They just washed dishes by hand 3 times a day. Breakfast dishes, lunch dishes, dinner dishes standing at the sink, hands in hot soapy water, back bent, for hours. The vacuum cleaner was heavy. It weighed 15 or 20 pounds. It had no attachments, no swivel head. You had to push it hard across the carpet. You had to move all the furniture yourself. You had to vacuum every single day because people wore shoes inside and tracked in dirt, and no one had heard of taking your shoes off at the door. The refrigerator was small. It did not have a freezer section big enough to store much. So you could not buy food in bulk. You could not meal prep for the week. You had to go to the store every 2 or 3 days, and the store was not a supermarket with everything in one place. You went to the butcher for meat, the baker for bread, the dairy for milk, the vegetable market for produce. You drove to 4 or 5 different places. You carried bags in and out of the car. You unloaded everything at home. You put it all away. And then 2 days later you did it again. The electric stove did not have a timer. It did not have a thermostat you could trust. It did not clean itself. You had to scrub the burners. You had to wipe down the oven. You had to get on your knees and clean spills that had baked onto the bottom. And you cooked 3 meals a day from scratch. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, no takeout, no delivery, no frozen meals that tasted good, no rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. You made everything. Eggs and bacon and toast for breakfast, sandwiches and soup for lunch, meat and potatoes and vegetables for dinner, and dessert, always dessert, because that is what good wives did. So the machines existed, yes, but they did not save time the way everyone thought they would. In fact, studies from the 1960s showed that housewives were working more hours than their mothers had in 1920. More hours, even with all the machines, because the standards had gone up. It was no longer enough to have clean clothes. They had to be perfectly clean, bright, white, pressed. It was no longer enough to have food on the table. It had to be hot, balanced, attractive, served on matching dishes. It was no longer enough to have a tidy house. It had to be spotless, dust-free, organized, ready for surprise visitors at any moment. The machines did not free women. They just raised expectations, and the women kept working, harder, longer, alone. So where did this idea come from? The idea that a woman belongs in the home, that her work is natural, that keeping a house is not real work. It did not start in 1960. It started centuries earlier. But the version that existed in the 1960s, the specific shape of it came together after World War II. Let me take you back. 1945. The war ends. Millions of men come home from Europe and the Pacific. They need jobs, they need houses, they need lives. And millions of women who had been working in factories, building airplanes and guns and tanks, are told to go home. Not asked, told. The factories do not need them anymore. The men are back. The women need to step aside. But the economy has a problem. All these men need jobs. And if women keep working, there will not be enough jobs to go around. So the government and the corporations and the advertisers all come together with a plan. They will convince women that their real purpose, their true calling, is not in the factory. It is in the home. They will make housework look appealing, modern, glamorous even. They will sell it like a product. And it worked. Magazines like Good Housekeeping and Ladies' Home Journal published article after article about the joys of homemaking. Advertisements showed sparkling kitchens and smiling mothers and children who never screamed. Television shows portrayed family life as neat and sweet and problem-free. And women, who had just spent 4 years holding the country together, were told that the most important thing they could do now was make a good meatloaf. It was propaganda. Beautiful propaganda, but propaganda nonetheless. Now, the idea that women should manage the household is not new. In agricultural societies going back thousands of years, men and women had different work. Men worked the fields. Women managed the home, the animals, the garden, the children. But here is the difference. In those societies, everyone knew that the woman's work was essential. It was not invisible. It was not dismissed. A farm could not function without her. The family would starve. The clothes would rot. The children would die. Her work had obvious, immediate, visible value. But by the 20th century, especially in cities, that visibility disappeared. Food came from stores, not gardens. Clothes came from factories, not looms. Water came from pipes, not wells. The work women did became invisible. It happened inside the house, behind closed doors where no one saw it. And when no one sees your work, it becomes easy to believe it is not work at all. There is an object that captures this shift perfectly: the apron. In the 1960s, the apron was everywhere. Women wore them all day long, frilly ones, plain ones, ones with pockets, ones with flowers. They wore them while cooking, while cleaning, while greeting guests at the door. The apron was a symbol. It said, "I am a housewife. This is my uniform. This is my identity." But go back 200 years. And the apron meant something different. It was a tool. A farmwife wore an apron because she was carrying eggs from the henhouse. She was kneading bread. She was butchering a chicken. She was birthing a calf. Her apron got covered in blood and flour and dirt and milk. It was evidence of her labor. By 1960, the apron was still there. But the labor it represented had become quiet, polite, hidden. It was no longer about survival. It was about presentation. And that shift from survival to presentation is everything. Because once your work is about looking good instead of keeping people alive, it stops being respected. It becomes decoration. And decoration does not get paid. Decoration does not get appreciation. Decoration gets taken for granted. So when you see those photographs of smiling housewives in clean aprons standing in perfect kitchens, understand what you are looking at. You are looking at a story someone wanted you to believe. You are not looking at the truth. The truth is that behind that smile was a woman who had already been awake for 4 hours, who had already made breakfast and cleaned the kitchen and started the laundry and scrubbed the bathroom and made the beds and swept the floors. And it was only 9 in the morning. Power always decides what counts as work. And in the 1960s, power was held by men, by corporations, by advertisers, by government officials, by doctors, by religious leaders. And all of them had something to gain by convincing women that housework was not real work. Let me show you how they did it. First, the corporations. After World War II, American factories had a problem. They had built up enormous production capacity to support the war, factories everywhere, workers everywhere, assembly lines running at full speed. But now the war was over. What were they going to make? They decided to make stuff for the home: vacuum cleaners, washing machines, refrigerators, toasters, mixers, blenders, electric knives, electric can openers, electric everything. But there was a problem. If they just sold women one vacuum cleaner, that woman would use it for 20 years. That is not good for business. So they had to convince women that they needed more, newer, better, faster. They had to create dissatisfaction. The advertisers did this brilliantly. They ran ads showing happy families gathered around a new refrigerator like it was a member of the family. They showed women smiling at their shiny new ovens like they had just fallen in love. They invented problems that did not exist. Is your floor clean, or is it just visibly clean? Does your laundry smell fresh, or does it smell truly fresh? Are you sure your dishes are sanitary? They made women paranoid, and then they sold them the solution: a new product, a better product, a product that would make them better wives, better mothers, better women, and it worked. Women bought the products, but the products did not make life easier. They just made life different, because now, instead of scrubbing clothes on a washboard, you had to operate a machine, feed it correctly, maintain it, fix it when it broke. Instead of sweeping the floor with a broom, you had to vacuum, which meant you had to move furniture, change bags, untangle cords. The work did not disappear, it just changed shape. Then there were the doctors. In the 1950s and 60s, doctors were almost all men, and many of them believed that women were naturally fragile, emotional, prone to hysteria. They believed that a woman's true purpose was motherhood, that her biology determined her destiny. If a woman was unhappy, if she felt exhausted or frustrated or trapped, the problem was not her situation. The problem was her. She was not adjusting properly to her natural role. Doctors prescribed sedatives, Valium, Miltown, Librium. They called them mother's little helpers. By the mid-1960s, 1 in 3 women was taking some kind of tranquilizer. 1 in 3. Think about that. An entire generation of women medicated into compliance. And no one asked why they were so unhappy. No one asked if maybe, just maybe, the problem was not the women. Maybe the problem was the system. Then there was the church. In the 1960s, religion still had enormous influence over daily life. Churches taught that a woman's highest calling was to serve her husband and raise her children. That marriage was sacred. That divorce was shameful. That a good Christian woman did not complain. She endured. She sacrificed. She smiled. Preachers gave sermons about the importance of the family, about how a stable home was the foundation of a stable society, and at the center of that home was the wife. If the family fell apart, it was her fault. If the children misbehaved, it was her fault. If the husband strayed, it was her fault. She had failed in her duty, so she worked harder, prayed more, blamed herself, and finally there was the government. The United States government had a vested interest in keeping women at home, because women at home meant men in factories. Men in factories meant a strong economy. A strong economy meant a strong country. A strong country meant winning the Cold War. So the government promoted the nuclear family as a patriotic ideal. Propaganda films, public service announcements, school curriculums, all of it reinforced the same message. A woman's place is in the home, and if she was unhappy there, she was ungrateful, she was selfish. She was un-American, so she stayed quiet. She kept working. She kept smiling. And the system kept running. Because that is what power does. It convinces people that the way things are is the way things must be. It makes exploitation look like nature. It makes exhaustion look like love. And it makes resistance look like failure. Let me put you inside her body for one full day. It is Tuesday, 1963, suburban America. The alarm clock rings at 5:30 in the morning. She does not hit snooze. There is no snooze. There is only wake up or let the entire day collapse before it starts. Her husband is still asleep. The children are still asleep. The house is dark and quiet. She gets out of bed. Her feet touch the cold floor. It is winter. The heat does not come on until 6. She pulls on a robe and walks down the hallway. The first thing she does is go to the kitchen and start the coffee. Not press a button, not pour water into a machine that does everything for you. She fills the percolator with water. She measures the coffee grounds. She puts it on the stove. She lights the burner with a match. Then she stands there for a moment, waiting for her brain to wake up. She is 34 years old. She has 3 children. She has been married for 12 years. Her back hurts. It always hurts. From lifting children, from bending over the sink, from carrying laundry baskets up and down stairs. But she does not think about it. Thinking about it does not help. She goes to the living room and turns up the heat. The furnace in the basement clanks and groans. She goes to the bathroom and washes her face. She looks at herself in the mirror. She is already tired, but there is no time to be tired. She goes back to the kitchen. The coffee is ready. She pours herself a cup. She drinks it black. No time to add sugar or milk. She opens the refrigerator and takes out eggs, bacon, milk, bread. She lights the stove again. She puts a pan on the burner. She lays the bacon in the pan. It starts to sizzle. The smell fills the kitchen. While the bacon cooks, she cracks eggs into a bowl. She whisks them. She pours them into another pan. She flips the bacon. She stirs the eggs. She puts bread in the toaster. The toast pops up. She butters it. She puts it on plates. She takes out glasses. She pours orange juice. She pours milk for the children. She sets the table, forks, knives, napkins. It is 6:15. She walks down the hallway and wakes her husband. He grunts, rolls over, gets up slowly. She goes to the children's rooms. She opens the door to the boys' room. 2 beds, 2 lumps under blankets. She says their names softly, then louder. Then she pulls the blankets off. They groan. They complain. She does not argue. She just leaves the door open and moves to the next room. Her daughter, 8 years old, still asleep with a stuffed rabbit. She strokes her hair, tells her it is time to get up. The girl opens her eyes, smiles. This one is easier. She goes back to the kitchen. The bacon is done. She puts it on a plate lined with paper towels to soak up the grease. Her husband comes into the kitchen. He is wearing a suit. He sits down at the table. He does not say good morning. He picks up the newspaper. She pours him coffee. She puts his plate in front of him. Eggs, bacon, toast. He eats without looking at her. The children stumble into the kitchen. The boys are fighting about something. She does not have the energy to find out what. She tells them to sit down. She puts plates in front of them. Her daughter asks if she can have jelly on her toast. She gets the jelly from the refrigerator. She spreads it on the toast. She cuts it into triangles. She sits down for the first time since she woke up. She takes 1 bite of toast. Her youngest son spills his milk. It goes everywhere. The table, the floor, his pajamas. She gets up. She grabs a towel. She wipes the table. She wipes the floor. She wipes the child. She goes to his room. She gets him clean clothes. She brings them back. She helps him change. By the time she sits down again, her toast is cold. She eats it anyway. Her husband finishes his breakfast. He stands up. He kisses her on the cheek. He says he will be home at 6. He leaves. She hears the car start. She hears it pull out of the driveway. Now it is just her and the children. She tells them to go get dressed. They disappear down the hallway. She hears doors slam. She hears more fighting. She clears the table. She scrapes the plates into the trash. She stacks them in the sink. She runs hot water. She adds soap. She washes each plate, each fork, each glass. Each pan. Her hands are red from the heat. She dries everything. She puts it away. She wipes down the table. She wipes down the counters. She sweeps the floor. It is 7:15. She goes to check on the children. The boys are dressed. But their shirts are on backwards. She fixes them. Her daughter cannot find her shoes. They look under the bed, in the closet. They finally find them in the toy box. She brushes her daughter's hair. She ties it with a ribbon. She makes sure everyone has their school bags. Their lunches. Wait, the lunches. She forgot to make the lunches. She runs back to the kitchen. She takes out bread, peanut butter, jelly. She makes 3 sandwiches. She wraps them in wax paper. She adds an apple to each bag, a cookie. She hands the bags to the children. She walks them to the door. She watches them walk down the street to the bus stop. She waves. They do not wave back. She closes the door. The house is quiet. It is 7:45. She has been awake for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and now the real work begins. She goes back to the kitchen. She washes the lunch plates she just used. She wipes the counter again. She goes to the bedrooms. She strips the sheets from her bed, from the boys' beds, from her daughter's bed. She carries the sheets downstairs to the basement. Her arms are full. The sheets are heavy. She stuffs them into the washing machine. She adds detergent. She turns the dial. The machine starts to fill with water. While the sheets wash, she goes back upstairs. She makes the beds with the spare sheets from the linen closet. She picks up toys. She picks up clothes. She puts everything back where it belongs. She dusts the furniture. She wipes the windowsills. She scrubs the bathroom, the sink, the toilet, the tub. She gets on her knees to scrub the floor. Her knees ache. The tile is hard. She stands up. Her vision goes blurry for a second. She steadies herself on the sink. She goes back downstairs. The washing machine has stopped. She pulls out the wet sheets. They are heavy, soaking. She wrings them out as best she can. She carries them outside to the clothesline in the backyard. It is cold. Her hands are wet. The wind bites her fingers. She pins each sheet to the line. 1 clothespin, 2 clothespins. The sheets flap in the wind. She goes back inside. It is 10 o'clock. She has been awake for 4.5 hours. She has not sat down. She pours herself another cup of coffee. It is cold now. She drinks it anyway. She sits at the kitchen table. She has 15 minutes before she needs to start making lunch for herself. She closes her eyes just for a moment. Let me tell you about the thing she is holding in her hand. The coffee cup. It is white ceramic. Simple, no decoration. It has a small chip on the rim from the time it fell into the sink. She got it as a wedding gift 12 years ago, a set of 8 cups. Now only 5 remain. The others broke over the years. This cup has been in her hand almost every morning of her marriage. It is warm, familiar, solid. And if you went back in time 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, you would find women holding cups just like this. Different materials, different shapes, but the same purpose. A moment of warmth, a moment of pause, a moment alone. Coffee itself is a relatively new thing in America. It came from Ethiopia centuries ago. Traders brought it to the Arab world. Then to Europe, then across the ocean. By the 1960s, coffee had become part of the American morning ritual, but the way people drank it said everything about who they were. Men drank coffee at diners, at work, in meetings. While talking business and making decisions, women drank coffee at home, alone, in between tasks. A man's coffee was social. A woman's coffee was stolen. There is a famous advertisement from 1962. It shows a woman sitting at her kitchen table. She is holding a cup of coffee. She is smiling. The text says, "A moment for yourself." As if a moment was a luxury, as if she needed permission to sit down in her own house. That advertisement understood something true. A housewife's day had no breaks, no official rest, no lunch hour, so she had to create tiny pockets of time, moments so small no one would notice. A cup of coffee was one of those moments. But even that was complicated, because coffee cost money, and she did not earn money. Her husband earned the money. He gave her an allowance for groceries and household expenses. If she wanted something for herself, she had to justify it. She had to take it out of the grocery budget, which meant less money for food, for the children, for the family, so even her coffee was a negotiation, a guilt. Some women skipped it entirely. They drank water. Or tea made from the same bag used 3 times. But this woman, the one sitting at the table right now, she drinks her coffee. It is the one thing she allows herself, because if she does not have this, she will break. The cup itself tells a longer story. Ceramic cups have been around for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks drank from ceramic cups, the Romans, the Chinese. For most of history, cups were expensive, precious. A family might own 2 or 3. You did not throw them away when they chipped. You kept using them. You passed them down. By the 1960s, cups were cheap, mass-produced. You could buy a set of 8 at the department store for $2. But even cheap cups carried meaning. The design, the color, the brand. A woman's dishes said something about her. Fine china meant status. It meant you came from a good family. It meant you had taste. Everyday dishes meant practicality. It meant you were sensible, modest. No dishes meant poverty, shame. So women cared about their cups. They washed them carefully. They dried them by hand. They arranged them neatly in the cupboard, because the cup was not just a cup. It was evidence of order, of care, of a life under control, even when everything else felt like chaos. This woman finishes her coffee. She rinses the cup in the sink. She dries it. She puts it back in the cupboard, handle facing out, exactly where it belongs, and then she gets back to work, because the 15 minutes are over. Not every housewife lived the same life. This is important. When we talk about the 1960s housewife, we are usually talking about a white, middle-class suburban woman, but that was not the whole picture. Let me show you the divides. First class. The woman I just described, the one drinking coffee in her kitchen, she is middle class. She owns her home. Her husband has a steady job. They have a car, a television, a washing machine. She is tired, yes. Overworked, yes. Invisible, yes, but she is not poor. A poor woman in 1963 did not have a washing machine. She washed clothes by hand, in a tub, or in the sink, or in the bathtub. She hung everything to dry because she could not afford a dryer or even the electricity to run one. She did not have a vacuum cleaner. She swept with a broom. She got on her hands and knees and scrubbed floors with a brush. She did not have a car. She took the bus. She walked. She carried groceries in her arms for blocks. Her children did not have separate bedrooms. They shared one room, sometimes one bed. She did not make 3 meals a day from scratch because she could not afford that much food. She made one big pot of something cheap, beans, rice, potatoes, soup, and she stretched it across 3 days. Her husband, if she had one, did not work in an office. He worked in a factory or on a construction site, or he did not work at all because he could not find a job, and if he did not work, she had to. She cleaned other people's houses. She took in laundry. She babysat other people's children while neglecting her own. She worked just as hard as the middle-class housewife. Harder, but no one called her work noble. No one put her in advertisements. No one wrote magazine articles about her. She was invisible in a different way. Then there was race. A black housewife in 1963 faced everything the white housewife faced, plus segregation, plus racism, plus the constant threat of violence. She could not shop at certain stores. She could not sit at certain lunch counters. She could not use certain bathrooms. If she lived in the South, her children went to underfunded schools. Her neighborhood had unpaved roads. Her house might not have running water. And if she worked outside the home, which many black women did because their husbands could not earn enough to support the family, she worked as a maid, cleaning white women's houses, washing white women's dishes, raising white women's children, while her own children were home alone, or with a neighbor, or with an older sibling who was still a child herself. She left her house at 6 in the morning. She took 2 buses across town. She worked all day in someone else's kitchen. Then she came home at 7 in the evening and started her own housework, her own cooking, her own cleaning, her own laundry. She did twice the work for half the respect. And no one called her a housewife. They called her the help. Then there was geography. A rural housewife in 1963 did not have the same machines as a suburban housewife. Many rural homes still did not have electricity or indoor plumbing. She carried water from a well. She cooked on a wood stove. She used an outhouse. She did not go to the grocery store. She grew her own food. She canned it. She preserved it. She stored it in a root cellar. She did not buy bread. She made it every few days. From flour she might have ground herself. She did not buy clothes. She sewed them, by hand, or on a treadle sewing machine that required her to pump with her feet while guiding fabric with her hands. Her husband worked the farm. She worked alongside him, feeding animals, milking cows, gathering eggs, planting, harvesting. And then she went inside and did all the housework too. Her day started before dawn. It ended after dark. She had no machines to save her time. She had no neighbors to have coffee with. She had no television to watch. She just worked and worked and worked. And finally there were the women who were not housewives at all, the unmarried women. The widows, the divorced women. In 1963, if you were a woman without a husband, you were suspect. People asked what was wrong with you. Why had no one wanted you? Or if you had been married, what had you done to drive him away? You could not get a credit card without a man's signature. You could not get a mortgage. You could not even rent an apartment in some places without a father or brother to co-sign. If you worked, you earned 60 cents for every dollar a man earned doing the same job. You could not be a doctor, a lawyer, a business owner, a boss. You could be a secretary, a teacher, a nurse, a waitress, and people felt sorry for you. Because you did not have a husband to take care of you, even if you did not want one, even if you were perfectly fine on your own. So when we talk about the housewife of the 1960s, we have to understand, she was not one woman. She was many women, living many different lives, but all of them shaped by the same system, a system that told them their value came from serving others, a system that made their work invisible, a system that gave them no choice, and called it freedom. Here is the thing almost everyone gets wrong. People think housewives in the 1960s did not work because they did not get paid. But that is not how it actually worked. They did get paid, just not in money. Let me explain. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a legal concept called coverture. It is an old English common law idea that carried over into American law, and it said this: when a woman married, her legal identity disappeared. She became covered by her husband. She could not own property in her own name in many states. She could not sign contracts. She could not open a bank account without his permission. She could not take out a loan. If she worked and earned money, that money legally belonged to her husband. He could spend it however he wanted. She had no claim to it, but here is the flip side. He was legally required to support her, to provide her with food, shelter, clothing. That was the deal. She gave up her legal independence. In return, he gave her financial security. Her labor, all the cooking and cleaning and child-rearing and housework, was considered her part of the marriage contract. His labor, the job, the paycheck, was his part. It was a trade, but it was not an equal trade, because if he decided to leave, he could. He could walk out the door, keep his paycheck, keep his job, keep his independence, and she would have nothing. No work experience, no savings in her own name, no credit history. In most states, she could not even divorce him without proving fault. She had to prove he had committed adultery, or abuse, or abandonment. And even if she could prove it, even if she got divorced, she would be socially ruined. Divorced women were seen as failures, as threats, as women who could not keep a man happy. People did not invite them to parties. Churches shunned them. Employers did not want to hire them. So most women stayed, even in bad marriages, even in dangerous marriages, because staying was safer than leaving. Now here is the part that will surprise you. Many women at the time did not see this as oppression. They saw it as security, because for thousands of years, women had been vulnerable, pregnancy was dangerous, childbirth killed women regularly, children needed care. A woman alone with children had almost no way to survive. She needed a man, a father, a husband, a brother, someone to protect her, to provide for her. Marriage was not romance. It was survival. So when the 1950s and 60s offered women a deal, stay home, take care of the house, and in return you will have a roof over your head and food on the table, many women took it, gratefully, because the alternative was worse. The alternative was poverty, shame, danger. But here is what nobody told them. The deal was changing. For the first time in history, women did not need men to survive. They could work, they could earn money, they could support themselves, but the law had not caught up. The culture had not caught up. The men had not caught up. So women were trapped between two worlds. The old world where marriage meant security, and the new world where independence was possible. And that tension, that impossible position, is what made the 1960s so dangerous for women's mental health, because they had been sold a story. The story said, if you are a good wife, if you keep a clean house, if you raise good children, if you make your husband happy, you will be happy too. You will be fulfilled. You will be complete. But thousands of women were discovering that the story was a lie. They had done everything right. They had married. They had children. They kept perfect houses. And they were miserable. And they did not understand why. There is a book published in 1963, the same year we have been walking through. It is called The Feminine Mystique. A writer named Betty Friedan wrote it. She interviewed hundreds of housewives. She asked them how they felt. And over they said the same thing. They described a problem with no name, a sense of emptiness, of frustration, of feeling like something was wrong with them. They had everything they were supposed to want, but they were not happy. Friedan called it the feminine mystique. The lie that women could find complete fulfillment only through marriage and motherhood. The book was explosive. It sold millions of copies, because women read it and said, finally, someone understands. Finally, someone is saying out loud what I have been feeling in secret. I am not crazy. I am not broken. The system is broken. Now, historians debate how much impact that one book had. Some say it started the women's liberation movement. Others say the movement was already happening and the book just gave it words. Both are probably true. But here is what is not debatable. By the end of the 1960s, women were angry. They were tired of being unpaid laborers in their own homes. They were tired of being legally invisible. They were tired of being told they were selfish for wanting more. And they started to fight back. But in 1963, that fight had barely begun. Most women were still trapped in the story, still believing that if they just tried harder, worked longer, smiled bigger, everything would be fine. Still thinking the problem was them, not the system. And that belief, that internalized blame, might be the cruelest part of all. Every day was the same. That is what made it unbearable. And that is also what made it survivable. Because when every day is the same, you do not have to think. You just move. You follow the rhythm. You do what you did yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. The routine becomes a kind of trance. Wake up, make breakfast, clean the kitchen, make the beds, do the laundry, make lunch, clean again, start dinner. Serve dinner, clean again, put the children to bed, sit down, go to bed, wake up, again, again, again. There is a comfort in repetition. Your body learns the motions. Your hands know where everything is. You do not have to decide, you just do. But there is also a trap in repetition. Because when every day is the same, you disappear into it. You stop noticing yourself. You stop asking questions. You stop imagining that life could be different. You become the routine. Let me take you through the small rituals that filled her day. The ones no one noticed. The ones that kept everything running. Every morning after the children left for school, she wiped down the kitchen table, always in the same direction. Left to right, 4 swipes. She did not think about it, she just did it. Every Monday she stripped the beds and washed the sheets. Every Tuesday she ironed. Every Wednesday she cleaned the bathrooms. Every Thursday she went to the grocery store. Every Friday she mopped the floors. Every Saturday she baked. Every Sunday she cooked a big dinner for the family. The same tasks, the same days, the same order. If you asked her why, she would not have an answer. Because that is just how it was done. Her mother did it that way. Her grandmother did it that way, so she did it that way. There were smaller rituals too. Before she served her husband his dinner, she tasted it, not because she was hungry, but because she needed to make sure it was right. Not too salty, not too bland, not too hot, not too cold. She adjusted, she fixed, she made it perfect, because if it was not perfect, he would notice. He might not say anything, but she would see it in his face, the slight disappointment, and that disappointment would sit in her chest for the rest of the night. After dinner, after the dishes were done, after the children were in bed, she sat down in the living room. Her husband read the newspaper or watched television. She mended clothes every night. There was always something to mend, a torn hem, a missing button, a hole in a sock. She kept a sewing basket next to her chair, needle, thread, scissors. Buttons in a jar. She threaded the needle without looking. She stitched in the dim light of the lamp. Her hands moved automatically. And while her hands worked, her mind drifted. She thought about the things she did not say out loud. She thought about the girl she had been before she got married. The one who wanted to be a teacher, or a nurse, or maybe just someone who traveled. She thought about the life she had imagined. And then she pushed the thoughts away. Because thinking about it did not help. This was her life now. This was what she had chosen, or what had chosen her. It did not matter which. On Sundays, the ritual changed. Sunday was church. She woke up early, even earlier than usual, to get everyone ready. She made breakfast. She laid out clothes. She made sure the children were clean. She put on her best dress, her good shoes, her hat. She checked her lipstick in the mirror. Her husband drove them to church. They sat in the same pew every week. 3rd row from the front, left side. The service lasted an hour. She sang the hymns. She bowed her head during prayers. She listened to the sermon. The pastor talked about duty, about family, about God's plan. He said that a woman's role was sacred, that motherhood was the highest calling, that serving her family was serving God. She nodded along. She wanted to believe it, because if it was true, then her life had meaning. If it was true, then all the exhaustion, all the invisibility, all the repetition was worth something. After church, they went home. She cooked a big meal, roast beef, mashed potatoes, vegetables, pie. The family sat together at the table. This was the one meal of the week where everyone was required to be present. No excuses, no complaints. They ate together, they talked a little. Her husband asked the children about school. The children answered in short sentences. She served. She refilled glasses. She brought out dessert. She barely ate. There was too much to do. After dinner, after the dishes, after everything was clean, she finally sat down. Sunday evening was the only time she allowed herself to rest. She did not mend. She did not clean, she just sat. Sometimes she read a magazine, Good Housekeeping, Ladies' Home Journal, articles about how to make a better casserole, how to organize your linen closet, how to keep your husband happy. Sometimes she just stared out the window, watching the sun go down, watching the sky turn pink, then orange, then dark. And she thought tomorrow is Monday, and it starts again. Her body kept score, even when she did not want to notice. Her body remembered everything. The back pain that started after her second child was born, the sharp ache in her lower spine that flared up every time she bent over the sink. She never went to the doctor for it. What would she say? "My back hurts from washing dishes." They would tell her to rest, but rest was not possible, so she just lived with it. She learned to move in ways that hurt less. She learned to brace herself before lifting the laundry basket. She learned to ignore it. Her hands were always dry, cracked, red, rough from the hot water, the soap, the bleach, the constant wetness. She put lotion on at night, but by morning it was gone. Her knees ached from kneeling, scrubbing floors, bathing children, cleaning the tub. She was 34, but her knees felt 60. There were nights she could barely climb the stairs. She held the railing, pulled herself up, one step at a time, and then there was the exhaustion. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that lives in your bones. She slept 6 hours a night, sometimes less. She woke up tired. She went to bed tired. Tired was just her normal state, but the thing she did not talk about, the thing she barely let herself think about, was the fear that lived quietly under everything, the fear of pregnancy. She already had 3 children. She did not want more. She loved the one she had, but she was drowning. She could not imagine adding another. But birth control was complicated. The pill had been approved in 1960, but not every doctor would prescribe it. Some doctors believed it was immoral. Some believed it would make women promiscuous. Some only prescribed it to married women, and only if their husbands approved. And even if you could get it, it was expensive. Some women could not afford it, so they used other methods: diaphragms, condoms, rhythm method. None of them were perfect. Every month she waited. She counted days. She watched for signs, and if she was late even by one day, the fear crashed over her. Please no, please not again. She could not say that out loud, because wanting to avoid pregnancy made you seem ungrateful. Children were a blessing. Everyone said so. If you did not want more, something was wrong with you. You were selfish, unnatural, a bad mother. So she kept the fear to herself. And every month she was not pregnant, she felt a relief so intense it made her cry. Then there was the fear of illness. If she got sick, everything fell apart. There was no one to take over. Her husband could not stay home from work. He did not know how to make breakfast, how to pack lunches, how to do laundry. He had never learned. So even when she had the flu, even when she had a fever, even when she could barely stand, she got up. She made breakfast. She took care of the children. She kept the house running, because if she did not, no one would. She remembers one time when her youngest was a baby, she got mastitis, an infection in her breast from nursing. It was agony, fever, chills. Pain so sharp she could barely hold the baby, but she had to keep nursing. The doctor said if she stopped, her milk would dry up. So she nursed through the pain. She cried every time the baby latched on, but she did it, because that is what mothers do. And then there was childbirth itself. She had given birth 3 times. Each time she had been terrified. Women died in childbirth. Not as often as they used to, but it still happened. And even if you survived, things could go wrong. Hemorrhaging, infection, tearing. She knew women who were never the same after childbirth. Women who could not walk right, who had chronic pain, who lost control of their bladders, but no one talked about it. You were just supposed to be grateful you had a healthy baby. Your own suffering did not matter. During labor, she had been alone. Her husband was not allowed in the delivery room. That was the rule. Fathers waited outside, so she labored alone, with nurses she did not know, in a bright white room that smelled like disinfectant. They told her not to scream. They told her to be quiet. They told her she was being dramatic. And when the baby finally came, they handed him to her for a moment, then took him away. They put him in a nursery. She did not see him again for hours. When she finally held him, she felt relief, and exhaustion, and a deep, quiet terror, because now she was responsible for keeping this tiny person alive. And no one had taught her how. She just had to figure it out, the same way she figured out everything else, alone. There was one more fear she carried, the fear of her husband leaving. She had seen it happen. A man decides he is tired of his wife. Tired of the routine, tired of the responsibility. He meets someone younger, someone who smiles more, someone who does not nag him about taking out the trash, and he leaves, just walks out, and the wife is left with nothing. No job, no money. No way to support herself and the children. It did not happen often, but it happened enough. Enough that every wife knew it was possible, so she worked hard to keep him happy. She made his favorite meals. She kept herself presentable. She did not complain, or at least she tried not to. She laughed at his jokes. She asked about his day. She performed contentment because her survival depended on his satisfaction, and that dependence sat in her chest like a stone, heavy, constant. Unspoken, her body knew. Even when her mind tried to pretend everything was fine, her body knew. The world was cracking open, and she could feel it even from inside her kitchen, even from behind her clothesline, even from her spot at the sink with her hands in soapy water. Something was shifting. She could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive, a pressure in the air, a restlessness. 1963 was not a quiet year. In fact, it was one of the loudest years of the 20th century. Civil rights marchers were walking across bridges in Alabama and being beaten for it. A president would be shot in Dallas before November was over. Young people on college campuses were asking questions that their parents had been too afraid to ask. And women, quietly, in living rooms and church basements and coffee clutches across the country, were starting to talk to each other. Really talk. Not about recipes, not about whose children were doing well in school, about how tired they were, about how empty they felt, about the problem with no name. Betty Friedan's book was sitting on kitchen tables across America, dog-eared, underlined, passed from neighbor to neighbor like contraband. Because reading it felt dangerous. It felt like admitting something you were not supposed to admit, that the life you had been given was not enough. But the world was changing whether women asked for it or not. The economy was changing. In the early 1960s, the American economy was booming. Factories were humming. Suburbs were growing. New houses went up every week. But that boom created a problem. There were not enough workers. Businesses needed people. And there were millions of educated women sitting at home making casseroles. So slowly, quietly, employers started hiring women, not for executive positions, not for management, for secretarial work, for teaching, for nursing, for retail, but they were hiring them, and once women started working, something irreversible happened. They got paychecks, money in their own names, and money changes everything. A woman with her own paycheck did not have to ask permission to buy a coat. She did not have to justify every purchase. She did not have to be grateful. She just bought it. That small shift in financial power was enormous. It changed how women saw themselves. It changed what they thought they deserved. It changed what they were willing to tolerate. Then the pill changed everything again. The birth control pill had been approved by the Food and Drug Administration in 1960. By 1963, millions of women were taking it, and for the first time in human history, women could reliably control whether they got pregnant. That sounds simple, but think about what it meant. For thousands of years, women's lives were shaped by pregnancy. You got married, you got pregnant, you had children. You spent 20 years raising them, and then you were old. Your body was not entirely your own. It belonged to biology, but the pill changed that. If you could control when you had children, you could control when you worked, when you studied, when you traveled, when you lived your own life. The pill did not just prevent pregnancy. It prevented a certain kind of fate, and the women who took it knew exactly what they were doing. They were not being reckless. They were making a choice. The first real choice many of them had ever made about their own bodies. Then came the legal changes. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act was signed into law. It said that men and women doing the same job had to be paid the same wage. In theory. In practice, employers found ways around it. They gave different job titles to men and women doing identical work. They promoted men and not women. They hired women for lower-level positions from the start. But the law existed. And it said for the first time officially that a woman's work was worth the same as a man's. That was new. That was radical. That was the beginning of something. Then came 1964, the Civil Rights Act. It banned discrimination based on race. But at the last minute, almost as a joke, a congressman added sex to the list. He thought it would be so ridiculous that it would kill the whole bill. It did not kill the bill. It passed. And suddenly, discrimination based on sex was illegal. In theory. In practice, it took decades to enforce, but the law was there, and women started to use it. Then came 1968, 1969, 1970. Women's liberation groups forming on college campuses. Women marching in the streets. Women burning bras, or at least that is what the newspapers said. The truth is a little more complicated, but we will save that for another night. Women demanding equal pay, equal rights, control over their own bodies. The world the 1960s housewife had been built for was dissolving around her, and she had to figure out what that meant for her. For some women, the change was liberating. They went back to school. They got jobs. They discovered that the world outside their kitchen was interesting and challenging and alive. They felt, for the first time, like full human beings. For other women, the change was terrifying. Everything they had structured their lives around was being called a mistake, a trap, an oppression. And if their life had been a trap, what did that mean about the choices they had made? What did it mean about the years they had given? The decades of cooking and cleaning and child-rearing? Had it all been worthless? Some women became angry, not at the system, at the women who were changing it. Those women with their protests and their demands were making everyone uncomfortable. They were making husbands suspicious. They were making children confused. They were destroying the family, or so the newspapers said. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that the family was not being destroyed. It was being renegotiated. And renegotiation is always uncomfortable. It is always loud. It is always scary. But our woman in 1963 does not know any of that yet. She is standing in her kitchen in the middle of a Tuesday. The world is changing around her. She can feel it, but she has not decided yet what it means for her. She just keeps moving, keeps washing, keeps cooking, keeps running the routine, because the routine is the only thing she knows for certain. And certainty, even small certainty, is a kind of comfort. Here is something interesting. The 1960s housewife is one of the most misunderstood figures in modern popular culture, and she has been misunderstood in two completely opposite directions. Let me show you both. The first misunderstanding comes from nostalgia. Somewhere in the 1980s and 1990s, the 1960s housewife became a fantasy, a golden age image. She appeared in home decorating magazines, in retro diners, on cookie tins and refrigerator magnets, smiling, perfect hair, polka dot dress, cherry red lipstick. She became a symbol of a simpler time, a time when families ate dinner together, when women made everything from scratch, when home was warm and welcoming and smelled like fresh pie. This version of her became incredibly popular. Television shows like Mad Men, which premiered in 2007, brought her back in vivid color. The clothes, the kitchens, the cocktails, the aesthetics, beautiful, immersive, and deeply misleading, because Mad Men, for all its brilliance, was primarily about the men. The women were backdrops, beautiful, complicated backdrops, but backdrops nonetheless. The housewife became a decorative element, a piece of period styling. Like the furniture, the reality of her exhaustion, her legal vulnerability, her psychological entrapment, all of that got softened into ambience. People watched Mad Men and thought, what gorgeous wallpaper, what wonderful dresses. They did not think about the woman who scrubbed the floor on her knees. Then there is the internet version. On certain corners of the internet, the 1960s housewife has been resurrected as an ideal, the tradwife aesthetic. Women in vintage dresses baking bread, canning vegetables, smiling at the camera. The message is that this life was better, more feminine, more natural, more fulfilling. And there is something real in that longing. Because modern life is genuinely exhausting. The pressure to work full-time and raise children and maintain a home and exercise and be interesting and keep up with everything and achieve everything at once is genuinely crushing. So the image of a slower life, a life with clear purpose and simple tasks is appealing, deeply appealing. But here is what the aesthetic leaves out. It leaves out the legal reality. The woman in the vintage dress baking bread on Instagram can choose to go back to work tomorrow. She can open a bank account in her own name. She can leave if she wants to. She has choices. The woman in 1963 did not. Her life was not a lifestyle choice. It was a legal and social requirement. The aesthetic is beautiful. The reality was a cage. And confusing the two is not just historically inaccurate. It is genuinely dangerous. Then there is the second misunderstanding, the feminist revision. Some modern retellings of the 1960s housewife go too far in the other direction. They portray her as a victim, passive, oppressed, helpless. A woman who did nothing except suffer. But that is not accurate either. These women were not passive. They were resourceful, creative, intelligent, competent. They ran complex households with precision and skill. They raised children with almost no support. They built communities, they organized churches, they volunteered, they ran school boards. They were not sitting around waiting to be rescued. They were working, constantly, brilliantly, under conditions that most people today could not survive for a week. The problem was not that they were weak. The problem was that the system they operated in refused to acknowledge their strength. It refused to count their labor. It refused to give them credit. It refused to pay them. It refused to give them choices. So they did extraordinary things in extraordinarily limited circumstances, and we should honor that, not by pretending the circumstances were fine, but by recognizing the women who lived inside them. There is also the school version. Most people learned about the 1960s through a very particular lens. The lesson plan version. Civil rights movement. Check. Space race. Check. Vietnam War. Check. Women's liberation movement. One paragraph, maybe two. Housewives get mentioned briefly as context. The thing women were trying to escape, and then we move on. So most people have a paper-thin understanding of what daily life actually looked like. They know the headlines. They do not know the Tuesday. They do not know the woman at the sink at 7 in the morning with red hands and a cold cup of coffee. They do not know the weight of the laundry basket, the ache in the knees, the quiet fear, the ritual of the coffee cup, the small sadness of the uneaten toast. History taught in headlines produces headline understanding. Deep understanding requires the details. The smell of bacon at 6 in the morning, the sound of the washing machine clanking in the basement, the feeling of wet sheets heavy in your arms on a cold morning. Those details are not in the textbook. But they are the truth. And the truth, the full, complicated human truth, is always more interesting than the headline, always more respectful, always more real. So why did it last so long, if the system was so hard, so unfair, so exhausting? Why did generations of women participate in it without revolt? Why did it take until the late 1960s for things to begin to change in any serious way? The answer is not simple, but it is deeply human, and it has several layers. The first layer is memory. Women in 1963 remembered what came before, or they had mothers and grandmothers who remembered. They remembered the Great Depression. The 1930s, when families had nothing, when men could not find work, when children went hungry, when people lost their homes. They remembered the uncertainty, the terror of not knowing where the next meal was coming from. And after the Depression came World War II. Another decade of sacrifice, of rationing, of fear, of loss. So when peace came, when prosperity came, when the suburbs came and the washing machines came and the steady paychecks came, it felt like relief. It felt like heaven. You had a house. You had food. You had a husband who came home every night. You were grateful. Complaining felt ungrateful. It felt like spitting on a miracle. So you did not complain. You kept working. You kept smiling. You told yourself you were lucky. Because compared to what came before, you were. The second layer is community. Housewives were not alone. They had each other. The neighborhood was a network. Women borrowed cups of sugar. They watched each other's children. They sat together over coffee while the babies slept. They talked. They laughed. They complained in small, careful doses. They shared recipes. They shared worries. They shared the small cruelties and small joys of daily life. This community gave them something essential: belonging, a sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. And belonging is one of the most powerful human needs, even if the thing you belong to is imperfect, even if it limits you. The belonging itself has value. The neighborhood of 1963 was built around the housewife. She was the center of it. If she had gone to work, if everyone had gone to work, the neighborhood would have emptied. The coffee clutches would have ended. The borrowed cups of sugar would have disappeared. The children who played in the streets would have been alone. The community survived because she was there, and she stayed in part because the community needed her. The third layer is identity. For many women, being a housewife was not just a job. It was who they were. It was their whole self. They were mothers. They were wives. They were homemakers, and they took pride in it. The pride was real. A perfectly baked pie was a real achievement. A kitchen organized to run like clockwork was a real skill. Children who grew up healthy and kind and capable were a real accomplishment. These things had genuine value. And when someone does something with genuine skill and genuine care, they develop genuine pride in it. To tell a woman that her work was worthless, that her life had been a waste, that she should have done something else, something that counted, was not liberation. It was another form of dismissal. It told her once again that the thing she had given her life to did not matter. So some women defended the system, not because they were ignorant, but because they had real pride in real work. And they did not want that pride stripped away. The fourth layer is fear of the unknown. If you have spent 20 years doing one thing, the idea of doing something completely different is terrifying. Where would she start? What would she do? She had no job skills, no resume, no work experience since before her marriage. Who would hire her? What could she offer? The world outside the home had not been built for her. It had been built for men. The hours were set for men. The salaries were set for men. The expectations were set for men. If she walked into that world, she would be starting from nothing. At 34 years old, with 3 children at home, the risk was enormous, and the safety net was almost nothing. So she stayed, not because she was weak, but because the leap was genuinely terrifying, and because no one had prepared her for it. The fifth layer is love, the simplest layer. She loved her children completely, without question. And someone had to take care of them. Someone had to be there when they came home from school. Someone had to hold them when they were sick. Someone had to read to them at night. Her husband was not going to do it. The culture was not going to do it. The government was not going to do it. So she did it because she loved them. And love, real love, makes you do hard things without resenting them, or at least without resenting them all the time. The exhaustion was real. The frustration was real. The grief for her unlived life was real, but so was the love. Both things were true at the same time, and that is the most human thing of all. holding two true things at once, even when they pull in opposite directions. She held them every day. In the kitchen, on the clothesline, at the sink, in the quiet dark of the Tuesday afternoon, in the small cup of coffee she stole for herself at 10 in the morning, she held them, and she kept going. Zoom out for a moment. Just step back from the kitchen. Step back from the sink and the laundry and the cold toast and the sewing basket. Step way back and look at the whole picture. What does this actually tell us about human beings? Not just about women. Not just about the 1960s. Not just about America. About all of us. About what we do when we are given a role and told it is who we are. About what happens when invisible work holds everything together. About what it costs when we refuse to count the labor that does not come with a paycheck. Here is the first big truth. Human beings are extraordinarily good at adapting to systems that were not designed for them. She did not design that system. She was born into it. She inherited it the same way she inherited the color of her eyes, and she adapted, brilliantly. She learned the rules. She mastered the game. She became an expert at navigating a world that had been built without consulting her. She could run a household budget on a fraction of what it actually cost. She could stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 different meals. She could manage the schedules and emotional needs of 5 different people simultaneously. She could anticipate problems before they happened, fix things before they broke, smooth over conflicts before they exploded. She was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinarily competent, and the system she operated in used that competence completely, without acknowledgement, without compensation, without even basic recognition, and she adapted to that too. She learned not to need acknowledgement. She learned to find satisfaction in small things, the clean floor, the folded sheet, the child who said thank you unprompted. She learned to make peace with invisibility, because the alternative was bitterness. And bitterness, in a life with no exit, is a kind of poison. So she adapted, and that adaptation is both inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. The second big truth is this: invisible labor does not disappear when it goes unrecognized. It just goes unpaid and unacknowledged, but it still gets done. The work that kept civilization running in the 1960s was not done in boardrooms or factories or government offices. It was done in kitchens and nurseries and bedrooms and laundry rooms, by women who were told their work did not count. But without that work, the man in the boardroom would have had no clean shirt. Without that work, the child who grew up to invent something brilliant would not have survived infancy. Without that work, the social fabric that held neighborhoods and communities and families together would have unraveled. The invisible work was the foundation. And the people standing on that foundation looked down and saw nothing holding them up. That is not just a 1960s problem. That is a human problem. We still do it. We still fail to count the labor that does not come with a title. The parent who stays home with a sick child, the person who coordinates the family, the one who remembers everyone's birthday, manages everyone's feelings, holds everyone together. We say we value it. We do not pay it. We say we appreciate it. We do not protect it legally. We say it is important, and then we treat it as optional, as less than, as invisible. 60 years later, and we are still doing it. The third big truth is about stories. Human beings are story creatures. We live inside stories. We need a story about who we are and why our life matters. The housewife of 1963 had a story. The story said, "You are the heart of the home. Your work is sacred. Your sacrifice is noble. Your family needs you. You are irreplaceable." It was not a perfect story. It had holes in it that you could drive a truck through, but it was a story, and a flawed story is better than no story at all. When the women's liberation movement began to challenge that story, it was not just challenging a political system. It was challenging the thing that gave women's lives meaning, and meaning is not something you can replace overnight. You cannot just tell someone that the story they have lived by for 30 years is wrong and expect them to be fine, even if the story was limiting them, even if the story was a lie in some ways. It was their story. It was what they had. And this is why social change is always slow and painful and complicated, because it does not just change laws, it changes stories. And changing the story of who you are is one of the hardest things a human being can do. The fourth big truth is about time. We are always living at the edge of what our era allows. The women of the 1960s could not see the full picture. They could not see what was coming. They could not know that within a decade, the world would look dramatically different. They only knew the world they were inside. And from inside any world, it is almost impossible to see its edges. We think the way we live now is natural. We think our current arrangement of work and family and gender and value is somehow inevitable. But it is not. It is just the story our era is telling. And 60 years from now, people will look back at us the way we look back at the 1960s housewife. They will see invisible labors we refuse to count. They will see systems we accepted without questioning. They will see the limits we lived inside without knowing they were limits. And they will shake their heads, just as we do now, because every generation is the product of its time, and every generation thinks it has finally figured it out. None of them have. Not completely. None of us have. We are all living at the edge of what our era allows, and the best any of us can do is try to see a little further than the people who came before us. Try to count the labor that goes uncounted. Try to acknowledge the people who are holding everything together quietly. Try to ask who is doing the invisible work. And then actually pay attention to the answer. The fifth big truth is the simplest one. People are almost always doing the best they can with what they have been given. She was doing the best she could, with the information she had, with the options she had, with the world she had inherited. She was not a victim. She was not a symbol. She was not a cautionary tale. She was a person. A whole, complicated, tired, capable, frightened, loving, frustrated, proud, invisible, irreplaceable person. And her life that ordinary Tuesday in 1963 matters. Not because it was perfect, not because it was fair, but because she lived it fully, every single exhausting minute of it. The house is quiet now. It is nearly 10 o'clock at night. The children have been in bed for an hour. Her husband fell asleep in the armchair watching the news at 9:15. She turned off the television carefully so the click would not wake him. She went back to the kitchen. She wiped the counters one more time, not because they needed it. Just because a clean counter in the morning is a small kindness to the person she will be tomorrow. She checked the back door, locked. She checked the stove, off. She turned off the kitchen light. She stood in the hallway for a moment in the dark. The house settled around her. Old houses do that. They breathe at night. Small sounds, creaks and sighs, the furnace humming below, the sound of the neighborhood going to sleep. A dog barking somewhere down the street, then stopping, a car passing slowly, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling. She went to check on the children. She opened the door to the boys' room first. Both of them sprawled across their beds like they had fallen from great heights, one sock on, one sock somewhere in the sheets. She pulled the blanket up over the nearest one. She watched them breathe for a moment, in the dark. With their eyes closed, they were impossibly sweet. All the noise and mess and fighting of the day completely gone. Just two small people breathing in the dark. She pulled the door almost closed. She went to her daughter's room. The little girl was curled around her stuffed rabbit, her mouth slightly open, her hair spread across the pillow. She smelled like soap in sleep. She stood in the doorway for a long time. Long enough that the moment became a memory while it was still happening. She closed the door softly. She went to the bathroom. She washed her face. She looked in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, not unhappy. Just tired in the way that comes from a full day, a used day, A day where things were done and taken care of and kept together. She put cold cream on her face. She brushed her teeth. She looked at her hands, red at the knuckles, dry at the fingertips. She put lotion on them slowly, working it into each finger. Her hands knew things. They knew the weight of a wet sheet, the resistance of bread dough, the fragility of a baby's head, the roughness of a scrub brush, the smoothness of a just-ironed collar. They knew the shape of this house, every drawer, every door handle, every cupboard latch. They knew this life. She went to the bedroom. Her husband was still in the armchair. She would let him sleep there. He would wake up at 2 in the morning with a stiff neck and come to bed. He always did. She turned down the covers on her side. She sat on the edge of the bed. She reached down and took off her shoes. The relief of that. The simple relief of taking off your shoes at the end of a long day is one of the oldest feelings in the world. She sat for a moment. The room was dark except for the small lamp on the bedside table. The light was warm, yellow, like the inside of something safe. She thought about tomorrow, Wednesday, bathroom day. She would need to get more bleach. She was running low on bleach. She made a note in her mind, bleach and butter. She was almost out of butter. And she needed to call her sister. She had not called her sister in 2 weeks. Her sister lived 4 states away in Ohio. They had grown up in the same house, shared a bedroom for 17 years. Now they talked on the phone every Sunday. Except last Sunday she had forgotten. Or not forgotten. She had started to call, and then the baby down the street had started crying through the wall, and she had gotten distracted, and by the time she remembered, it was too late. She would call on Wednesday, after the bathrooms. She turned off the lamp, the room went dark, she lay down, the pillow was cool, she pulled the blanket up, the house breathed around her, the furnace hummed. A train, somewhere far away, crossed a crossing she could not see. She listened to it, the low, long sound of it traveling through the dark, something about a train at night, the way it goes somewhere without you. The way it carries that sound across a whole landscape while you stay still. She always liked that. As a child, she used to lie in bed and listen to the trains and wonder where they were going. Kansas City, she used to think, or further, the coast. Somewhere with an ocean. She had never seen an ocean. She kept meaning to, someday, when the children were older, when things were a little easier. Someday, she closed her eyes, her body was already releasing. The back, the shoulders, the knees. All the held tension of the day slowly letting go. This was the thing about the body. It forgave you every night. Every single night, no matter how hard the day had been, the body eventually let go. It sank into the mattress. It slowed. It released. And for a few hours, you were not responsible for anything. Not the laundry, not the dinner, not the children, not the budget, not the clean counters, not the bleach you needed to buy, just breathing, just dark, just the sound of the house settling. Just sleep. At the very beginning of this, I told you something. I told you that she woke up before everyone else, always, every single day, because if she did not, the whole house would fall apart. And that was true. It is still true. Think about all the people who wake up before the world notices. They are still out there. Different circumstances, different houses, different decades, but the same invisible labor, the same uncounted hours, the same quiet competence in the dark. We started tonight with a contradiction. The idea that the 1960s housewife had an easy life, a simple life, a life that would be restful by today's standards. And we have spent a long time inside that contradiction, inside her kitchen, inside her Tuesday, inside her back pain and her cold coffee and her wet hands and her stolen 15 minutes at the kitchen table. And what we found underneath the contradiction was not simplicity. It was depth, enormous, quiet, overlooked depth. She was not simple. Her life was not simple. Her work was not simple. She was a person operating a complex system with almost no support, almost no recognition, and almost no way out. And she did it every day. She did it while the world around her cracked and shifted and changed. She did it while advertisers told her she was fulfilled, while doctors told her she was fragile, while the church told her she was called, while the government told her she was essential, while her husband told her nothing at all, because he did not notice, not because he was cruel, but because the invisible is, by definition, impossible to see, and she made herself invisible. Because that is what the system asked of her. Be invisible, be seamless, be the thing that holds everything together without anyone knowing you are doing it. She was good at it, remarkably good at it. And the price of being good at invisibility is that nobody sees you. Nobody counts what you do. Nobody asks if you are tired. Nobody thinks to wonder. The coffee cup is still in the cupboard, handle facing out, exactly where she put it. The sheets are on the line in the cold morning air, flapping slowly. The laundry basket is empty at the bottom of the stairs. The counter is clean. The children are asleep. The house is quiet. She is asleep. And tomorrow, before anyone else wakes up, before the cold floor, before the percolator, before the alarm clock cuts through the dark, she will be awake. Because there is breakfast to make. Because there is always breakfast to make. And here is what I want to leave you with tonight. Every single thing you take for granted in your daily life, every clean surface, every folded piece of clothing, every meal that appeared on a table, every child who got to school on time with a lunch packed and shoes tied, every household that functioned without anyone declaring an emergency, all of it was built on someone's invisible labor. Someone who woke up early, someone whose hands got rough from the work, someone who did not get paid, someone whose name is not in the history books, but whose life, whose Tuesday, is the actual texture of history, the part that holds everything else up, the foundation. She is the foundation, and foundations do not get celebrated. They just get stood on, by everyone who never looks down. The train is still moving somewhere out there in the dark, going somewhere she never went. The house is breathing softly. The furnace is quiet now. The neighborhood is asleep. And you are almost there too. Let your shoulders go. Let the day finish itself. You have been thinking tonight about a woman you never met. A woman who woke up early and worked until dark and loved her children and kept the whole thing running with her tired, capable hands. She did not need you to know her name. She just needed someone to notice. And tonight, you noticed. So let that be enough. Let the counters be clean. Let the sheets be dry. Let the house settle around you. Let the coffee cup wait in the cupboard, handle facing out, right where it belongs. Sleep well. You have earned it just like she did. Every single Tuesday. Every single ordinary, invisible, irreplaceable Tuesday.